This video lecture has been produced using artificial intelligence with the supervision of Belhaven faculty. Welcome. Today we're going to explore a systematic framework for using assessment data to drive continuous school improvement. We'll start by understanding student learning data. Then we'll move into the key measures of learning, define the purpose of assessments, and then cover how to inventory and analyze them. We'll finish with some key reflections. So let's dive right in. Before we can improve anything, we first have to understand what it is we're measuring. And that means defining student learning data and making sure we're asking the right questions from the very beginning. You know, it's easy to get lost in all the numbers, but truly effective data use always starts with a few simple yet very powerful questions. These 4 questions here really act as our guide. They push us to look past just the scores and ask that critical question, are we aligned? Is our curriculum, our instruction, and our assessment all working together? Now, this is where the data becomes truly powerful. A single school-wide average can hide so much, but when we disaggregate the data, that is, when we break it down by different student groups and follow those groups over time, we start to see the real story. We can uncover patterns and ensure that learning opportunities are equitable for all of our students.
Okay, so now that we know what questions to ask, let's take a look at the tools we use to find the answers. This brings us to the different types of assessments, the key measures of learning.
It's absolutely vital to understand the difference between our assessment tools. You can think of standardized tests as a kind of annual checkup, a broad look at overall health. Formative assessments, on the other hand, are more like a coach observing a player during practice. They are the ongoing small adjustments that guide daily instruction and really lead to improvement. This slide highlights 2 more key categories. Summative assessments are essentially the final exams of learning. They measure what a student has mastered at the end of a unit or course. In contrast, alternate assessments are designed to tackle those harder-to-measure skills, like critical thinking, often through real-world tasks like portfolios or presentations. But just knowing the type of assessment is really only half the battle. To use them effectively, we have to understand their core purpose. So, are we assessing for learning, as learning, or of learning? Let's break that down. Assessment for learning is primarily for the teacher. It's the data that informs instructional adjustments. Assessment as learning centers the student, empowering them through self-reflection. And finally, assessment of learning. That's for all stakeholders. It communicates the results for accountability and broader planning. With these concepts now in place, the next logical step for any school is to conduct a really thorough inventory of all the assessments that are currently being used. A proper inventory really depends on having precise definitions, like the ones you see detailed in this chart. Now, we won't go through this line by line, of course, but let's just highlight a couple of key distinctions that are absolutely critical for a school to understand. For example, let's look at formative assessment again. The key phrase here is during the learning process. Its purpose isn't just to grade, but to actually modify teaching and learning activities in the moment. It's the difference between a checkup and an autopsy. One is about improving the outcome while it's still happening. Here's another critical distinction: norm-referenced versus criterion-referenced tests. Put simply, a norm-referenced test compares one student to other students. It's about ranking. A criterion-referenced test, however, compares a student's performance against a specific standard of mastery. It's not about being better than someone else, it's about demonstrating knowledge of the material. Both have value, but they answer very different questions. So, an inventory, guided by these clear definitions, helps you start asking those necessary tough questions. Are we using our tools the way they were intended? Are we even testing what we're actually teaching? This process can reveal where there's redundancy and, maybe more importantly, where there are gaps because you're not getting enough of the right information. This quote really gets to the heart of the matter. If our assessments aren't telling us whether students are learning what we are teaching, then they aren't serving their purpose. The goal is always to move from simple data collection to actionable understanding. Once assessments have been inventoried and are clearly understood, the focus then shifts to analyzing the results. This is how we identify patterns and guide our improvement efforts. Looking at a school's average score is a little like looking at the average temperature of a hospital. It really doesn't tell you much about the individual patients. The real insights only begin to appear when we track progress over time and, crucially, disaggregate the data to see how different subgroups of students are performing. And ultimately, this analysis has to lead to action. The goal is to pinpoint what's working well so we can replicate it and to identify the challenges so we can address them. It's about finding clear implications for instruction and curriculum, and even identifying what new questions we need to ask. All right, to finish, let's bring all of this together by reflecting on how these principles can be applied to the goal of continuous school improvement. As we conclude, I'd like you to consider your own context. First, how would you now define student learning data? Think about the multiple forms it can take, from a standardized test score all the way to a simple classroom observation. And why is this data so important for continuous school improvement? How can it become not just a report on the past, but a true roadmap for the future that guides instructional decisions? I encourage you to take a hard look at how your own school is assessing student learning. Are you using the appropriate methods for the intended purpose? Is there a clear and undeniable alignment between what you teach, and how you measure success? And finally, a last thought to leave you with. Who should know about the student learning data of a school? Beyond teachers and administrators, who are the stakeholders that need access to this information to truly support the success of every single student? Answering that may be the key to unlocking continuous improvement.